Shen Wulong faces defeat at the hands of Gaio Ryuki and Yamashita Yasuo. Now granted, it's in a video game, but we might not see Shen Wulong lose for a while because I was wrong about Cat 2 happening next arc. It seems it's going to actually happen. Well, Cat 2 isn't completely out of the question, but Shen Wulong confirms that multiple people will be able to face him, or at least have a chance, but we'll break that down as the chapter goes on. Pretty chill chapter, all things considered, and it is reflected in the title of the chapter, which is called How They Spent the Day. So you could tell from the title that this was going to be a chill chapter, but it starts off with the negotiations between Yan, Nogi, and Mestudo about, of course, Ganryu Island, which is where the final battle with the connector will take place. And they're sort of finalizing the location, so it seems like maybe this is a flashback. Well, not really. It seems like it's after Mestudo meant to meet up with Wakatsuki. So Mestudo sort of had it in mind that they were going to go to Island, and now they're sort of finalizing that along with Nogi and Yan. Yan, of course, doesn't want this fight to happen in general, but he agrees reluctantly because Shen Wulong has agreed and wants to have this fight. Mestudo then talks about the island itself. It's an isolated island, nowhere really to hide, at least when you're coming into the island, although Medicine Man did sort of sneak in there. So Nogi kind of finishes up that line of thought and he says, the reason we're having it here is so that, you know, the world won't be able to infiltrate that place without them noticing. Yan, of course, agrees to this because there's also an advantage in it for him, because there's been a split in the worm. Lohan is basically a rebel within the system, and so he has his own forces, and it would be great for Yan to be able to tell when they actually come in. But on the note of Lohan, Yan is also kind of worried that the Kengan Association know about, you know, Lohan's rebellion, and that actually presents an opportunity for them, which is something I've said before. The Kengan Association can try to use Lohan to benefit them, but the reason the Kengan Association probably already knows this is because of the consecutors and them actually talking to Oma. We do know Yamashita was there, multiple Kengan Association representatives were there, and so this is a very tense situation that Yan is kind of going into right now, and he's the only one really feeling the pressure right now, which is kind of sad for him. Mestudo even offers, you know, to get Yan a massage basically, but that's the end of that scene. We don't know specifically what the rules are for the entire match, just the location and possibly the involvement of multiple people. Again, this doesn't outright say Cat 2 is not happening. I think there's a good chance that Cat 2 could happen before the final fight with the connector. So yes, multiple people can participate, but the final fight will be against the strongest person there. Although that does give Wulong a huge advantage now that I'm thinking about it. But moving on to the next scene, we are at Yamashita's house and we see Koga and Ryuki. They're done with their training. They seem to have recovered as well. So this might be some time from when they left the Kure clan mansion. And Ryuki, he asks Koga, hey, do you want to fight Shen Wulong? Now this is very interesting how Koga replies to this, because he just flat out says, like, Ryuki, you know I actually cannot do that. Like, I've got nothing on Shen Wulong, which is a very interesting attitude that he has towards him. Because remember, he recently fought Ryan. With Ryan, he could picture 6 months in the future, I'm gonna be in. And assuming there's still some time left until the training season is over. And so the fact that he is basically saying, nah dog, like that's a no-go off the gate. I'm gonna get my ass beat. And also, and this is what Koga adds, it makes more sense for Ryuki or Oma to fight Shen Wulong, which I can see where Koga's going with it there, the ones whose lives are on the line here. But Ryuki, he sort of agrees that he's on a similar boat with Koga. Like, even though it makes more sense for Ryuki to fight Shen Wulong, the Kure clan, or Ryon specifically, beat the hell out of them. And Ryuki kind of recognizes that as like, look, if we're getting our asses beat by Kure clan members and Kure Ryon, we're gonna get killed by Wulong probably. But the huge surprise of this chapter starts here. We see Yasuo come in, he smells the food. Koga and Ryuki are cooking up a storm, but he says that there is a guest. And this guest is the person they were just talking about. Not Kure Ryon, not the Kure clan, no. The man, the myth, the legend, Shen Wulong. My man just pulled up. And with that, we sort of jump forward in time a bit and they're having lunch, casually eating. Now it seems like Shen Wulong kind of expected Yamashita to be there, although that does leave the question of where Yamashita might be. But yeah, casual Wulong as always. Again, there's really two sides to this character, and most of the time, at least in this series, you deal with the good half of Shen Wulong. The half that won't kill your entire clan, Wulong. But my man is walking up to his enemy's crib and eating their food. But Koga, he starts asking the question. He's like, okay, Wulong, why did you actually end up coming here? And Wulong's here for a very simple reason. Merely to share some food. He found a good butcher shop, got a lot of food, wants to share it. It's that simple. Again, casual Wulong, he's not a mastermind type of planner. There is the part where maybe he's trying to see how far they've gauged, but the primary motivator here is the food that he has and sharing that, which is kind of cool. But Koga then asked the question, since him and Ryuki were talking about whether or not they could fight him, Koga just asked Wulong himself, who better than the god of the verse to tell you if you could square up with him or not? But Wulong gives a very interesting answer, and that is that you don't necessarily need a right to fight him. You could always just actually ask to fight him. And of course, they're talking about the actual Kengan match that is to come, and so Wulong, he's kind of in the loop, it seems, with what the rules will end up being. And so he clues in Koga and Ryuki that just because it's a Kengan match doesn't mean that one person gets to fight him. So, alluding to the gauntlet setup we saw with Oma and the Fury 5 match, right? But they're adjusting the rules so that everyone gets a shot. Now that's big, because Wulong is like, he's opening the floodgates. But there's gotta be something to these rules that is in some way beneficial to Shen Wulong, right? Like, will they be like, let's say, 5 matches a day until it is done? Until there are basically no more challengers? Or will there be other types of setups? There needs to be constraints on this that I'm far more interested in actually knowing what they are. But Wulong, he says, hey, it really depends on whether you actually want to or not. Like, are you down to throw down? But with that being said, we transition over to a little bit later in the night or in the afternoon, and Yamashita finally comes home to find basically their biggest enemy playing video games with his kids. But luckily, he's losing here, so he's lost a video game of, it seems like a Mario Kart like game, where he gets last placed, Ryuki gets first, and Yasuo is basically saying Wulong needs to train more to get good at this game. But Wulong is gonna be here for a lot longer, it seems, because he asked what's for dinner. So Yamashita, there's a moment where he's like, wait, he's actually staying for dinner too. Like, it ain't enough that he's eating lunch or whatever. But that's where that part of the chapter ends. And the last part of the chapter, it's a lot shorter, but we're back at the hospital where Setsuna was being held. And it's a lot later in the afternoon, and we see Oma walking with Kurara. And Kurara, he's there, of course, for 2 reasons. One that we'll find out later on in the chapter, but for now, she's basically there as, a bodyguard, it seems. I don't know who she is protecting Oma against, but hey, Oma appreciates it either way, it seems. But Kurara, she seems to be a bit worried about, Oma meeting up with Setsuna, because the relationship between them has been a little bit, not exactly the most stable relationship, right? But Oma, you know, he thinks it's gonna be fine. He just needs to find out a few things and also check on his health as well, because, you know, Oma at least cares enough for Setsuna. So they get in, they're in the hospital. Setsuna looks like he's recovering pretty fine. My man survived a fight high diff against Nico, which I think he's the second character, I think, who survived against Nico. Well, technically speaking, we never see Nico do anything that, you know, results in massive lives lost unless it's the lives of kids. But Mutemba survived against him in, you know, earlier on in this manga. And now Setsuna has also survived against the last Nico. But Setsuna's like, hey, ain't it after visiting hours? And this is the second reason, of course, that Kurara is here. She managed to pull some strings in order to have both Oma and Setsuna, you know, have this little talk that they're having now. And with that, Kurara leaves the room and Oma, you know, they sort of sit down and they start having their talk. I wonder if we will actually see what they talk about, because I think this has to do with what Setsuna's notes ended up being. Because he knows about Wulong. He also needs to know what he meant about the false god. Of course, I have theories about this that I have done before. But I do wonder if Lohan is connected to this, because I think Nico will definitely be connected, right? But yeah, that is the chapter. Pretty good chapter overall. Don't forget to like and sub. And until next time, take it easy.